To mention about Ruth here. So Ruth Willet, KM4LAO, is a 22-year-old extra class amateur radio operator. She recently graduated from Kettering University, and most of us saw that, in Michigan with a double major in engineering physics, mechanical engineering, and a minor in acoustics. She was first licensed in 2015 as an amateur radio operator and upgraded to extra within a year. The first club she joined was GARS, and she has many dear mentors and friends here. She's incredibly honored to be GAR's life member and looks forward to virtually sharing her adventures on satellite this evening. Without much further ado, Ruth, take it over.
All right, are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, slideshow. All right, hopefully you all are seeing my slideshow PowerPoint by now. I am so happy to be here doing a presentation for you all on satellite operations, both FM and linear contacts, which I will go through in this presentation. Thank you all for letting me do it virtually. I had a prior obligation in Michigan this past Sunday, so just the logistics of trying to get from there down to Georgia just didn't work out in time to make it in person. Satellites are definitely very hands-on, but hopefully this presentation will give you a better understanding about how it all works. And Kevin brought that arrow antenna so you can see the type of antenna that I use all the time for making satellite contacts. And hopefully I can help you just get a better idea for how satellite operations works and the equipment to use to get on the air. So my focus today is to introduce you all to the multiple types of satellites that are in low Earth orbit, detail a basic system that can get you on the air for a very low cost right away, describe in depth the checklist that I use to make contacts, and share fun ways that operators can connect on and off the air. Operating through satellites, or birds as they are often called, is a thrill for me because they allow me to use my amateur radio skills in a fast-paced, always in changing environment that any ham, no matter their license class or age, can get involved in. There's been over 100 amateur radio satellites that have been operational in space since the very first amateur radio satellite was launched in 1961, only 3 years after Sputnik. These satellites started as beacon transponders and very quickly improved to be full transponders. Nowadays, most satellites are tiny CubeSats like you see on the right here. They have a lower construction cost and can usually get payload space a little bit quicker due to their smaller size. Most satellites that we use here in the US are built by AMSAT, the Amateur Radio Satellite Corporation. This is an organization that has the goal of fostering amateur radio participation in space research and communication. Their volunteers are involved in building CubeSats, testing satellites, helping organize ways to get them launched, and partnering with ARIS, Amateur Radio on the International Space Station, to enable groups to communicate with astronauts on the International Space Station, like I was able to do at the Youth on the Air camp last month. They also created a wonderful annual booklet called Getting Started with Amateur Radio Satellites, which has a lot of good information and some of which is also being covered here. You may notice that my slides presentation are actually with the Youth on the Air background. I'm doing a modified version of the presentation that I did for camp a couple weeks ago for you all, since it's the most up to date. So there are about 30 amateur radio satellites active, all of which are in low Earth orbit right now. So satellites in low Earth orbit mean that they're orbiting the Earth in an altitude between 160 and 2,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. So each satellite has an orbital period between 88 and 127 minutes. So as you can see in the GIF on the left, that's the time that it takes a satellite to go all the way around the world. So we are bouncing our signals directly through the satellite to make contacts. Therefore, amateur radio operators can only make contacts when they are in a satellite's footprint. That is, when the satellite is above the horizon at your location. The size of the footprint is relative to the satellite, and it depends directly on its height in low Earth orbit. Because of this, passes can range from only a couple of minutes to 20 minutes, depending on your location and the height of the satellite's orbit. If a satellite pass has a really low elevation, you're on that edges of the footprint, that edges of that circle you see on the right. And therefore, you can be able to receive signals from much greater distances across the entire diameter of that footprint. But because it's much lower, the actual pass may be much shorter. So there's pros and cons for every different pass, depending on what you're looking for. So now that we've covered a little bit of the physics of satellites in order to understand them passes better, let's discuss the type of satellites that we can actually use to communicate. So there's three types: digisats, FM satellites, and linear transponders. The first type are digisats. These are satellites which transmit and receive digital modes, generally just on 2-meter simplex. They're really fun and quite easy to work. You can get into them using only a handheld and a directional antenna. My first Digipeater QSO was actually with Patrick, WD90WK, back in 2019 when we were at the Titan Missile Museum in Arizona, and we worked each other from about 10 feet apart through the satellite. They are unique among the other types of satellites because they're simplex, and therefore you don't need too much equipment to get on, which makes it very fun and easy to use. One of the most exciting things about digital satellites may be the fact that there is packet radio equipment available for use on the International Space Station. When the amateur radio gear on board the ISS is not in use for educational school contacts or just completely turned off due to other station activity, it will be operational, and dozens of ham radio operators can make contacts using this digital modes. The second type of satellites, and often the most common for beginners, are the FM satellites. They're basically just repeaters in the sky. Like earthbound repeaters, we transmit on one frequency, receive on another, and need a CTCSS tone in order to get into the satellite repeater. FM satellites are unique from terrestrial repeaters, though, because the transmit and receive frequencies are on 2 different bands. The transmit frequency is called the uplink, and the receive frequency is called the downlink. There are 5 functioning FM satellites in orbit right now. 3 are active all of the time, and 2 are turned on schedule. 2 of the most common are SO50 and AO91. When we're discussing FM satellites, they're categorized by what are called modes. So mode UV is when you transmit on UHF and you receive on VHF, while mode VU is the exact opposite. For example, as you can see on the screen here, SO50 has an uplink of 2 meters and a downlink on 70 centimeters, while AO91 has that exactly reversed. A good pass on one of these satellites tends to be about 12 or 13 minutes, and it generally really isn't too hard to make some contacts. The one drawback of FM satellites is because, like all repeaters, you can only make one contact at a time. So because of this, passes can get pretty crazy, especially when it's the weekend or someone is operating in a very rare grid square. The third type of satellites are linear transponders. Linear satellites take the same concept of transmit and receive on different bands, but instead of being built for just one frequency, they're built for an entire range of frequencies that is known as the passband. Just depending on how the satellite was built, these passbands can range from anywhere from 20 to 100 kilohertz, which gives you a lot of space to make contacts. So linear transponders operate using upper sideband, lower sideband, CW, and occasionally digital modes on VHF, UHF bands. Each linear satellite has a very specific passband, and anything transmitted on the uplink will be retransmitted on that downlink passband. But you've got an entire range of frequencies. So how those transmit and receive frequencies are connected is a little bit more complicated. There's 2 basic types of linear satellites, those with inverting passbands and those with non-inverting passbands. So a non-inverting passband means that if an operator transmits upper sideband on the high end of the uplink, they will receive upper sideband on the high end of the downlink. This is the same throughout the entire passband. But conversely, if you're wanting to use an inverting passband, That means if you want to receive upper sideband on that same high end of the downlink, you're going to have to transmit lower sideband on the low end. So it flips where you're transmitting, where you're receiving based on the signal. Linear satellites are cool though. They're an upgrade from FM satellites because they're generally launched higher than FM birds, so you can communicate for much longer distances. And as I mentioned, you have that whole range of frequencies to operate in. You can have multiple conversations occurring all at the same time. So a lot of the general congestion from FM passes is removed because of that. In general, I just love satellite communications because you can bounce a signal off of a moving satellite and talk to people either standing right next to you or hundreds of miles away. You can talk to anyone in a footprint that is constantly changing as the satellite moves through space and as the world turns. And that adds new dimensions to the pass, as it's good to be aware of the geography of where the satellite is passing over, so you can have a general idea of who is going to be on at a particular time. It's also very fast paced, and you get to get very good at multitasking, since you're often handling multiple radios and tracking the satellite and trying to talk accurately at the same time all at once. And finally, the most interesting aspect of satellites may just be the Doppler effect. So Doppler effect is an effect that is produced by a moving source of waves, such as radio waves moving toward or away from an observer. So think about those ambulance sirens we hear all the time. While the frequency of the siren is technically always the same, to someone watching that ambulance approach, pass, and then move away, the sound moves from high to low. This phenomenon works exactly the same for amateur radio satellites, and it requires operators to change their uplink and or downlink frequencies throughout the pass. For FM satellites, Doppler effect isn't too hard to remember. Since an FM signal is relatively large, frequencies are only changed a couple of times during a 10 to 12 minute pass. 70 centimeters is affected by Doppler more, so the transmit or receive 70 centimeters frequency will change while the 2 meter generally stays the same. So here I've showed the effect of Doppler effect on SO50. When you're operating on a satellite, operators will transmit on 1 2 meter frequency for an entire pass, but they will be adjusting their receive frequency from high to low in order to hear the satellite clearly throughout the pass. And you go from 1 to 7. So when the satellite is just coming up over the horizon, you're going to want it on 1 or 2. So 145, 436, 810, or 805. But by the middle of the pass, and then by the end of the pass, you will be decreasing that frequency steadily. Doppler effect does add a slightly bigger twist to linear satellite operations, however. On linear transponders, both the transmit and receive frequencies are able to change. Since single sideband and CW signals are much smaller than FM, you're required to change your frequency almost constantly throughout the pass. So I've got a video here showing a beacon on a satellite. So a lot of the linear transponders have beacons, CW signals, so that you can figure out exactly where that satellite is and make sure you're tracking it correctly before you start talking. I'm gonna first try and see if the audio is gonna work from my end. Just holler, it's not a very long video, so if it's not, then we can switch over to oh, it's not working. Let's just see if it's gonna work from here. And if it's not terribly important, but it's just you can hear that frequency changing throughout the pass. So did that audio come through at all for anybody?
Yeah, the audio came through here at the hangar.
Yay! Cool, yay. So this might go better than we thought. So yeah, that was a beacon on one of the linear transponders. Hopefully you could hear through that 10-second clip how that CW signal was changing. I was not touching the dial at all. It was changing as the satellite kept moving. So it's pretty fast and keeps keeps a lively clip. So it always keeps you on your toes, trying to keep up and make sure you don't sound like Donald Duck when you're talking on satellite. So that's the Doppler effect. The key to operating well on any satellite pass, no matter if you're doing FM, linear, or a digital transponder, is situational awareness. It's really important to listen and try to get the rhythm of passes before you transmit. FM birds, for example, are similar to terrestrial repeaters in that you shouldn't be calling CQ. There's so many people on that you can state your call sign in grid square or call someone directly without cluttering up that repeater using a CQ. Meanwhile, on linear transponders, you've got that whole range of frequencies. So you are able to call CQ up and down that linear passband because there's so much more space available. Simply being willing to listen before transmitting once you're able to hear a satellite and learning general etiquette based on the different types of satellites will go a long way to helping you make successful contacts. So now that we've talked about the different types of satellites, let's go into the specific gear that I like to use for satellite contacts. So this is a general satellite gear checklist that I put together along with some average prices. As you can see, there seems like a fair number of things to need, but a lot of them are free. The biggest important thing is you want radios and you want some type of antenna. Most of this is going to be applicable to both linear and FM satellite passes. But I will, when there are differences, I will explain that as we go along. So the first thing you need for any satellite work is a directional antenna. Egg beaters and other omnidirectional antennas can be used to make contacts in a pinch, and I know people that have done so decently well. But it is immeasurably easier to communicate through that orbiting satellite when all your signal is being directed in one direction. You'll be able to hear better, you'll be able to transmit better, it'll just be a much smoother and more enjoyable experience. So there's two basic types of directional antennas that people tend to use for satellites. Elk antennas or arrow antennas, if you're operating handheld portable. Some stations definitely love and use the big, large Yagi antennas on rotors and work wonderfully. But I generally operate portable, so most of what I'll be going over is a lot of the portable type equipment that's easier, a little more affordable initially to get into. So arrow and elk antennas are very similar. The only difference really is that arrow has the 2 meter and 70 centimeter elements on different polarity, while the elk has them on the same polarity. Both work pretty well. It really depends on the operator's choice. I have used both, but what I got started with was arrows, so I tend to stick with those for my operation. Well, once you get the antenna, you need to be able to communicate. You need some radios. So for FM satellites, it's pretty easy. You just need an FM radio that can use VHF, UHF. For handout operations, you can use HTs from almost any brand, Yaesu, ICOM, Kenwood, and even Bofang, or any larger base station with FM capabilities. You can certainly mix brands as I do, so one radio can be used for transmit and one can be used for receive based on whatever you have around. It really doesn't matter if you want to use handhelds or you want to use a larger radio. Whatever works well for you, whatever equipment you have that you can use to get on the air. But you might be wondering why I'm using 2 radios though. Something you're going to hear a lot about in amateur radio satellites is operating full duplex. Full duplex means that your radio setup enables you to hear the receive frequency while you are transmitting. This is critically important because it provides instant feedback if you're hitting the satellite when transmitting, and it helps with situational awareness so that you're not stepping on other operators trying to make contacts. Some HTs like the Kenwood THD72A have full duplex capabilities. Most, however, do not. So if you're using handhelds for portable operation, most people just use 2 and hook up 1 radio for transmit and 1 radio for receive. But a number of the bigger radios a lot of the bigger, newer radios will also have full duplex capabilities for satellites, like the 9700 has that capability. So if you want to haul that radio outside and just use 1 radio instead of 2, that is certainly a good option as well. speaking of that 9700, the gear that you're going to need does differ a little bit slightly if you want to do linear satellites as well. Linear satellites, like I said, you've got to be able to do single sideband, CW, or digital modes on VHF, UHF. So I provided a list here of some of the most common radios that are used for, and a lot of the satellite operators that I know, for linear transponders. There are quite a few options that people use to mix and match, but a lot of, depending on if you want the smaller size with the Yaesu FT817s, or if you want slightly larger with some of the other ICOM radios. But as with the handhelds, you can mix and match to get the full duplex. When we were at Yoda Camp, we were able to use some of the newer ICOM 705s. Those are not full duplex, so we were able to pair up and use two of them, or use an ICOM 705 and an 817, whatever worked well for what we were doing at the time to try to make some contacts. And if you have a handheld that can receive single sideband and CW on VHF UHF, like the THD74A can, I've used an 817 for transmit and a handheld for receive in a pinch on linear satellites. Once you get those radios and that arrow antenna, or arrow or elk antenna, depending on what you want to use, you definitely want to make sure you have some good quality coax. Since you're operating on higher frequencies, it's vitally important to have that quality coax between the antenna and the radios to prevent loss. If you're only using one radio, then you can purchase a diplexer in order to be able to do both the transmit and receive just on that one radio. If you're not using a diplexer or have more than one radio, I've used a variety of RG58 coax, Wyman, or HRO standard coax. The important thing is what I ended up doing was I made sure to standardize all of the connectors on my radios and coax. I standardized, make sure everything was B and Cs. That way I can easily mix and match the coax with different radios based on what I'm gonna do. And it helps ease the strain of the tiny connectors on that HT if I add that extra adapter, and it just makes it easier for me when I'm moving around. So you may be wondering, what exactly do we exchange on satellites? Like, I've talked about how they work, but I haven't discussed what we're actually talking about. Important in ham radio. You need to be able to determine your location. On VHF, UHF, including satellites, one of the most common ways of doing this is using Maidenhead grid squares. So as many of you may know, Maidenhead grid squares are a way of dividing the world up into 1 latitude by 2 degree longitude sections. Each of these sections are further broken down until a very accurate alphanumeric position can be given. So in general, when we're operating on satellites, we will be exchanging our 4-digit grid square. So around y'all in Atlanta, that would be Echo Mike 73 or Echo Mike 74. And it's fun because then we can try to collect as many of these grid squares as possible. There are multiple ways of determining exactly where your grid square is. A lot of apps will provide this for you. Two of the ones I like best, which I've provided on the screen here, are Maidenhead on the left and Theodolite on the right. They make it possible to determine my location to multiple places, as well as often determining the direction of which way I'm going. They both go straight on my phone, and I just use the phone GPS in order to figure out my location. Maidenhead is nice because it will give you a dot on, as you can see on the left, it'll give you a nice little dot straight on the map so you can screenshot it and remember exactly where you were located. But I also like Theodolite because it combines in a lot of different capabilities, including a picture, so you can get a phone picture with that grid square overlaid right on top. So it's easy to remember exactly what the horizon looked like as well. But there's multiple free app options for both Android and iPhone, as well as online. Because you don't only have to use an app, you can also use websites that have satellite software prediction for quite a length of time. You need to be able to figure out exactly when a satellite is passing overhead. So you have all the gear and you want to get on a pass, well, you want to make sure you know when to go outside for that satellite pass. There's many options for both cell phone and computer. The one that I used when I first got into satellites was AMSAT's basic pass prediction. You go into you open up the pass prediction website that I've linked up here, and it'll open up the view you see on the right. And then I picked, I want to operate on SO50. And for this point in time, I was entering in the location for Yoda camp, so I could show the campers how it was going to work. So I pick your location in using Maidenhead grid squares or the longitude and latitude. And then when you hit predict, it'll give you that screen on the left, and it'll show you all the important information for a pass. So it'll give you the date and time in UTC. It'll tell you the general length of the pass. So this first one up here was 12 minutes long, while the later ones varied depending on the elevation of the pass. And it's giving you that elevation right away. So it's going to tell you the acquisition of signal when the satellite comes up over horizon, the maximum elevation, and then the loss of signal, where it's going to be located on a map, as well as the time. So you can have a general idea exactly the times for that satellite contact. There's also a very nice website called From N2YO, who also tracks satellites. In addition to showing the times of the acquisition of signal, the loss of signal, and the peak elevation, it also has a useful map so you can see how the satellite will be traveling over the Earth, as seen on the left here. It's nice, like I said, it's useful to know the geography of where the satellite is passing over. So it's just nice to know kind of where the peak footprint is going to be at any particular time throughout the entire satellite pass from your location. So here's a basic list of the different pass prediction softwares I like. For a lot of them I've already shown you the pictures of, but gpredict and MacDoppler are also very useful, just depending on what equipment you have available, and some of them do have a small cost. But all the ones I've shown so far are free, which makes it very useful. And like I mentioned, there's a lot of apps that are useful as well for satellite pass predictions. The one I use is Maidenhead, that is able to show, this one here is GoSatWatch. It'll tie into my phone GPS once again, and it lets me, it'll auto-populate a list of satellites. As you can see on the left here, it'll show me all the ones that are going over my location. And then when I click on it, it'll show me a nice round footprint view of the satellite. And it's useful because it shows me a little arrow here to tell me so this pass is going from south to north. And then I can see that it is about 37 degrees elevation high above the sky. I managed to screenshot this right when AO7, a linear satellite, was passing overhead. So I was able to see, as it passes overhead, they have a little satellite beacon moving across the screen, which is very nice. And that allows me, in order to double check, if I'm in the middle of a pass, I can double check that I am exactly on target when I'm tracking the satellite. But in order to make contact, it's also useful to know a compass. As you can see here, I have been talking about the wrong direction. It's important to know where the satellite starts, where the acquisition of signal happens, and where you lose the signal. As a result, if you're going somewhere new, it's important to know what directions, where is north, south, east, and west, based on your location, so that you can make sure that you're pointing your arrow antenna or your antenna at the satellite. It's specifically where it's supposed to be, because there's nothing worse than going to a new location and trying to make satellite contacts and realize about halfway through the path that you've been kind of pointing in the wrong direction. Not saying I've done that, but it was cloudy once, so yeah, sometimes it happens. So it's very useful to have a compass in order to tell exactly what direction you're going. Most phones will have this for free, and you can also get a physical compass to carry in your bag as well. I discovered once I got into satellites that a voice recorder is also very useful. It's almost impossible to hold an antenna in radios, track the satellite, talk coherently, and write down contacts and call signs at the exact same time. It's much easier to record the pass so that every QSO you make is captured on the audio. This allows you to go back and listen to that pass later transcribe and write down those calls legibly so you can ensure you know who you talk to, and make sure you get everybody's call signs and information correct before logging it. Just make sure if you're gonna do a voice recorder, you want to make sure that you ID yourself on the recording before every pass, so you can state the time, location, call sign, and date, so that when you go back and log a contact, you can make sure you enter it all correctly. So how exactly do we log satellite contacts? There's many ways to do it, but like most amateur radio operators, we like to eventually get our contacts into Logbook of the World in order to earn awards. Some operators will configure logger programs, such as N3FJP on the right, in order to upload their contacts immediately from there. I've also included a link below that to CloudLog. It's an open source program that works amazingly for satellites because it was developed by Peter, 2M0QSL, who designed it specifically for satellite operations. But basically, you can take a lot of logging programs that are used nowadays and move around the different boxes in order to configure them exactly for satellite use. I tend to use N3FJP for HF work, and I don't really want to mess up all of my settings and mix up the HF and satellite logging configurations. As a result, I actually log all of my satellite contacts directly into TQSL. This allows me to create ADIF files, as seen on the left, for any location that I'm in. I can label it exactly with my grid square and the location and the time. I can add QSOs as I make contacts and then upload those contacts directly from TQSL. It makes it easier for me since I do a lot of roving. I operate to a lot of different grids, so it just makes it easier for me to keep track of where I've operated and when. But logging satellite contacts really can vary per person depending on your situation and what other activities you do in the hobby. But there's ways to modify most logging programs to enter all of the information that you might need. So what exactly do we talk about on satellites? FM passes can sound a bit like a crazy exchange of call signs and grid squares and alphanumeric codes, and when it's all flying fast and furious, sometimes it's hard to tell what's happening. The rules state that a valid satellite contact is an exchange of call sign and another piece of information. Given the satellites, most passes that we use are just quick conversations giving call signs and location, often using Maidenhead grid square. So I've included a sample contact here on the left. So this is a contact that I had with Sean, KX9X. So I was on a satellite and he may have heard me calling that I was on and operating in a rare grid. So he would have called me. I could have heard him or he could have called me. In this particular location, this time, I heard him operating. I knew he needed my grid square. So I called him, KX9X, this is KM4LAO. And when he was able to, he responded back, KM4LAO, this is KX9X, and then he gave me his grid square, Echo November 50. I made sure to confirm it, QSL Sean, and then gave him my grid square, Echo Mike 79. And then he responded with a QSL and our contact was complete. On FM satellites, because they're so busy, that's often all that you're able to do. But it makes it fun because then you can rapid fire those contacts. And there's some FM passes I've made about 30 contacts in 12 minutes, which is awesome. In general, there are two basic types of operators to listen for on satellite passes. Hams who operate from a home grid and those who are roving in a variety of Maidenhead grid squares. Rovers are so important in the satellite community because they travel to grid squares and they put them on the air in order to help other hams achieve their goals. So on the left, I've shown some of the basic types. On the left is a home state of a German operator with some beautiful rotor-mounted Yagi antennas. While on the right is a very active rover, Kylie, Kilo Echo Zero Whiskey Papa Alpha, operating portable with her dad up north. I tend to work portable all the time, and I rove as much as I can around, well, my school and work schedule, which makes it a lot of fun. So now that I've covered a lot of the background, history, and fun things to do on satellites, let's do a bit of a crash course on the actual operating procedure that I like to use before I show you a video of some successful contacts. So FM passes can get very busy, so it's useful to have a system of how you approach a pass. So I divided it down into pre-pass, during a satellite pass, and then after the pass ends. So first, you want to figure out a satellite and satellite pass to operate on. So decide if you want to do an FM satellite or a linear satellite, and then determine what time it might work well for you. Once you determine what the satellite pass is, you want to decide where to operate based on the elevation of the pass. For example, this SO50 pass here on the right, it's going from northwest to south, and it's only about 30 degrees elevation. That'll get you above like the tree line easy, but if you don't want to go somewhere with a huge building in the way, like a huge church in the way, that would obstruct your line of sight directly to the satellite. So you just, based on where you live, you can try to find somewhere to operate. Near our home in Virginia, there's a church parking lot that gives me a lot of good space to the southwest. So if I was doing this pass from home, I most likely would go there. Before I go out for the satellite pass, I have to gather all my equipment, make sure all my radios are charged and everything's working properly. And then it's generally useful to make sure that I can get the frequencies programmed in so that during a pass, I don't have to be thinking so hard about the frequency changes. I can just turn a knob on my radio memory and keep right on talking. So once you figure out where you want to operate and what satellite you want to operate on, you need to get to where you're going for the operating site. Once you get there, make sure you assemble your antenna and connect all the radios. The aero antennas, as Kevin has there in person, those elements on those antennas come apart. They screw together through that center boom of the aero antenna, which makes it quite nice for traveling. You can condense it down, and it's a little bit easier to move. But that means that when you get somewhere to operate, you gotta put it all back together and make sure it works. Make sure it is all the pieces are there. One thing I like to do once I'm at an operating site is to track out exactly how the satellite is going to happen. The acquisition of signal, where it comes up, that peak elevation, and loss of signal. I actually like to mark them using some bright orange cones. They work well because then I can put them around where I'm going to operate, and I don't have to think about that mid-pass when I'm doing everything else. I know, hey, the first 5 minutes of a pass, I need to be between these two cones. And then peak elevation should be right here in the middle. And then so forth to the loss of signal. It just makes it a little bit easier for me having one less thing to think about during a pass. And finally, you got to start that recording before you start a pass. Making sure you're able to remember the date and time, what satellite you're using, the grid square, the call sign you're using if you're able to use like special event stations or whatnot, and of course, what satellite you're operating on. So what do you do when you're in a pass? So first, you want to track where the satellite should be until you hear it. Often it'll take a little while in order to anywhere from a couple of seconds to a minute to be able to lock in on the satellite specifically and hear it very well. But you just want to track that antenna along the path of the satellite based on those pass predictions that you have already. Once you're able to hear the satellite, you're going to listen until you get a general rhythm of the pass. Depending on the time of day and where the footprint is, it'll vary who's on. There could be other rovers in special grids. There could be special events on. Just try to get a feel for who is operating and what they're doing. Once you feel comfortable, you're able to either call someone directly or just transmit your call sign in grid square and someone else will call you back. And that's the basic pass checklist. You repeat that for the entire pass in order to make contacts and see who you can talk to. So once a pass is done, you want to make sure you log it and that you can keep track of who you've been able to talk to. So I will transcribe my recording as soon as possible and log my contacts, sometimes on paper, but definitely online so that I can upload them to Logbook of the World for confirmation and award credit. Satellite operators are a lot of fun because we're a creative bunch. So a lot of people will have specialty QSL cards that they've also made so that you can send and receive fun designs of QSL cards in addition to that virtual confirmation. All right, so this is a contact I actually made with Joe, 84PZ, a couple years back. So here, I'm gonna play this for you so you can kind of hear how a contact works.
KG5CCI portable, Echo Mike 2333 line.
KM4LAO, AF Delta 4 Papa Zulu, Echo Mike 74.
Delta 4 Papa Zulu, QSL, I'm at Echo Mike
Copy 83, thanks.
Kilo 5, Papa Alpha Victor, Whiskey.
All right, so hopefully you all were able to hear that. But it was a very good example of how a quick contact works. We heard some other people finishing a contact at the beginning of it, and then he called me and I responded right away in order to make a contact. I love the I love the visuals here, so you can really see an idea of where the satellite is passing over and the line of sight that we both had to get in order to make the contact. I also put together a video from a satellite pass that I just did about a week and a half ago. I was roving on my way home from Youth on the Air camp, and I got on in a rare grid. So here's about a couple-minute video showing some highlights from that pass. You're going to see, I'm going to start out by, I'm tracking the satellite, and I think this starts right after I've got it already, but I'm tracking the satellite until I heard it. And then I threw out my call sign. I was in a rare grid, so I just stated my call sign in grid square so that people would know where I was operating. But I was full duplex, so I was able to hear that someone else was making a contact. So I was able to stop transmitting, wait for them to finish, and then do it again. And then as the video progresses, you'll see I was able to make some contacts.
KM4LAO, Echo Mike 38. Kilo Mike 4, Lima Alpha Oscar, Echo Mike 38. Kilo Mike
Whiskey Alpha 2, Zulu, Quebec, X-ray, Echo Lima 87.
Whiskey Alpha 2, Zulu Quebec X-ray, KM4LAO, Echo Mike 38.
Yeah, Yankee Victor 5, no. Kilo Mike 4, Lima Alpha Oscar, Whiskey Alpha 4, Victor Oscar Charlie.
Whiskey Alpha 4, Victor Oscar Charlie, KM4LAO, Echo Mike 38.
QSL, copy, Echo Mike 78.
QSL, thanks.
Yes, Victor Oscar Charlie. YAFN 41, Victor Oscar Charlie Station.
Mike 4, Lima Alpha Oscar, Rover, Echo Mike 38.
November 1, November X-ray Delta.
November 1, November X-ray Delta, Kilo Mike 4, Lima Alpha Oscar, Echo Mike 38.
Thank you very much. N1 NXT, we are FN 32.
QSL, thank you.
November Echo Alpha N2 FYA FN 41. KM4LAO, Whiskey 2Z Fox, Fox Nancy 30.
Whiskey 2, Whiskey 2Z Fox. Whiskey 2Z,
Venezuela.
Whiskey 2Z Fox, KM4LAO, Echo Mike 38.
QSL 73.
QSL. Ah, got it.
So there's definitely a lot going on there. I'm not perfect at it. There was a couple times where towards the end of the pass when I was trying to call Whiskey 2Z Fox, and I wasn't able to get in immediately. But you'll notice I was twisting that antenna. The satellites are tumbling through space as they travel. So twisting my arrow antenna as I heard it, was able to help me get correct polarity with the antennas on the satellite to be able to get into it cleanly so I could make the contact. So that was general FM satellite tips. There are a lot of similar tips for linear contacts. The pre and post contact work, pre and post satellite pass checklist is the same, but the difference is it varies when you're trying to actually make contacts on linear satellites because you've got that whole range of frequencies. So I have some steps here that are useful for making linear contacts. The first thing that I generally do is I use an Excel spreadsheet from K0PBR. He very graciously went through the different types of satellites for linear transponders and figured out if you want to operate on a particular frequency in the passband, what exactly your uplink or downlink would need to be. It makes it very helpful, gives me a little bit less to think about when everything is changing on linear satellites. And it's just nice to be able to have a general idea of where your frequency kind of should be throughout the pass. I have a link to that in here somewhere. Linear transponders especially, you definitely want to track it using an app and then your arrow antenna. But it's because they have that whole range of frequencies, it's generally most beneficial to find that CW beacon first. So towards the bottom of one of the pass bands, they will have a CW beacon transmitting the usually the name of the satellite and other information, so you can make sure you are tracking it correctly and you can hear it well. Once you're able to hear that satellite, you want to pick an uplink, the uplink or downlink frequency that's on 2 meters. Set that frequency on the radio and lock it, because 70 centimeters is impacted much more by Doppler effect. So in general, on linear satellites, you will also lock a 2 meter frequency on one frequency and then change the 70 centimeters based on Doppler throughout the pass. The hardest thing on linears for me has been trying to find myself. Again, things are changing. You've got to change all the frequencies and track the satellite and make sure that you can hear yourself. So I generally tend to just scroll through the frequencies that I should be around and just do soft whistles or testing 1, 2, 3, like we were doing earlier when trying to get this audio set up, in order just to finally be able to hear myself, because it is changing. And I do that until I find myself, and then I will start calling CQ to make some contacts. Sometimes I'm able to cut down on that process a little bit by, if someone else is on the passband that I want to work and they're calling CQ, I can figure out where they are operating and then tune myself to match them. But it helps a lot, having a way to figure out exactly what the frequency should be. So for example, on KM4LAO, it's one of the most common and easy linear satellites to get into. That uplink is going to be changing from high to low. The uplink is going to be changing throughout the pass, but the downlink is, the downlink is going to stay the same on a particular frequency. And you can see this Excel spreadsheet also lists the nice beacon, so you're able to know, oh, if I want to make sure I can hear this satellite, I'm going to go to around 145.855 during the beginning of the pass and try to make sure that I can hear it. So I have a linear satellite pass video here. Given that we did get a little bit delayed at the beginning with just audio issues and everything, I'm going to keep going for now and come back to this at the end, because I want to talk a little bit about the fun awards and stuff that we can earn through satellite communications. So I'm going to go to that first and then come back to this linear satellite pass video that we can listen to if we had the time and y'all are interested at the end. It's about 10 minutes, which is why I want to use 10 minutes first to do everything else and then come back to it. So half the fun of earning awards, half the fun of ham radio is earning awards, and satellites are no exception to this. There are many standard awards that we can earn, just like on HF, including VUCC, which is working 100 different grid squares, and subsequent endorsements up to many hundreds, or we can get satellite worked all states. One grand prize that many satellite operators strive for is called the Gridmaster Award, a clean sweep of all 488 grid squares in the lower United States. And if you work satellites long enough, there's even the possibility for getting satellite DXCC. Satellite operators also like to organically create interesting awards. Two of the most fun ones are the 80 Squared Award and the WABA Squared Award. So 80DX and 80HJ created the 80 Squared Award. Basically, if you work both of them on one pass, you can be eligible for a very fun QSL card. And if you work them on if you work them both on 5 different passes, then you're eligible for a keychain. So it's just fun to listen for them both and try to work them both on a pass. Just recently, 2 operators, KF6JOQ and November 6 Alpha Juliet, we created a locational spin on this. Basically, if you work both of them in a single satellite pass, then you will earn the Worked All Bakersfield Awards, since they both happen to live in the same town. So rather than having too much competition in order to make contacts, they decided to make a fun little QSL card out of it. AMSAT also keeps track of distance records between stations on different satellites. These distance records range anywhere from about 3,000 kilometers to 8,000 kilometers on current active satellites based on their location in orbit around the Earth. One of the most recent satellite distance records was achieved by Victor Echo 1 Charlie Whiskey Juliet and Fox 4 Delta X-Ray Victor. They made a transatlantic contact that was 4,860 kilometers apart on a linear satellite. So it's pretty cool to see how these distance records are stretched throughout an entire satellite's footprint and see how it varies per satellite. But like I've mentioned, rovers also make it possible for tracers to earn grids. So a special recognition of this effort has been created by AMSAT. And when you get a certain number of points for activating different grids on different modes and whatnot, you're able to earn the Rover Award. In addition, while it isn't recognized yet, many rovers will try to get reverse VUCC. That is roving from 100 different grid squares, which is pretty cool to see. What's great is satellites are also increasing popularity in the general ham radio community. Many satellites have started to become involved in many special event stations. I know that many of you enjoyed working the 13 colonies on HF, but this year 13 colonies were also active. All of them were all active on satellites. And the organizers of that event made it possible for, if you worked all of them on satellites, you were able to get a special commendation listing satellites, like you can with all CW or all voice. It's exciting to see that special event stations are including satellite operations, and it's exciting to see which ones will be next. Satellites are definitely short passes though, and so it's great to develop ways to stay connected both on and off the air. One great way to stay connected is through weekly AMSAT Nets. It's a great way to learn about upcoming roves, share operating information, or simply have a slightly longer conversation versus a quick exchange of call signs and grid squares. Off the air, there are always going to be those standard email lists and Facebook groups and whatnot. But the most popular way for satellite operators to exchange information is actually through Twitter. We're able to post in real time what we're doing, passes, what grids, we can communicate directly and share information and questions about different topics. And there's always advice being freely given. You don't even need a Twitter account to stalk satellite operators, since most of them are public accounts and can be read by anyone. It's really fun. It's a really fun way to see rovers in action. Like this picture of Kylie, Kilo Echo Zero Whiskey Papa Alpha, and her dad, Randy, November Delta Zero Charlie. They were recently roving and they decided to post a picture of the two of them operating. So it's fun to see where they were operating, what the terrain was like, and what they were doing during the pass itself. Specific satellite planning websites have also been developed for operators to use. Kilo 5 Echo Mike created this one called SatMatch. We can check passes with overlapping footprints. So basically you can go into this website and you can figure out what a footprint will look like from your location, like many of the other satellite operating websites I've shown you already. But the cool thing is it will also let you match up with a specific grid square. So this one I did this is from 2020. So I was out in the Outer Banks, a Fox Mike 25, and I was trying to work someone in California, Charlie November 93. So I entered both of our grid squares in here, and it was able to tell me that it showed me the exact amount of time that we were going to have a footprint. So we had 19 minutes on a linear pass that we could have communicated. And it's nice to know if you're on a busy pass to have a general idea, again, exactly how much time you're going to have to communicate with someone specifically. If you like Excel and data and pretty graphs like my nerdy self likes, there's also a great Twitter account called Gridmaster Heat Maps. This is run by Paul, KE0PBR, and he gathers data from different amateur radio operators on satellites and regarding how many grids in the lower United States that they have worked. He then inputs all this data into a beautiful Excel file that outputs this beautiful map that I'm showing you here on the screen. It's a really great way for rovers to have a good idea of what grid squares you might want to go to and operate from, because you can see the orange and reddish ones are a much lower percentage, while green ones have a higher percentage of confirmations from the different grid squares. All the satellite operators don't use this resource, but it is a very good idea of the trends of satellite operators and where it might be a good idea to go to. So in conclusion, there's a lot to do on satellites. But they are so worth it. They're very accessible for everyone, and the skills learned are applicable to other aspects of the hobby and just downright cool. After all, how often do you get to say that you talk to someone by bouncing a signal off a tiny little cube satellite moving 17,500 miles per hour. So do you have any questions, or would you like me to go back and show you a linear satellite contact pass?
I would say show the video, Ruth. I
All
don't
right.
know if you can hear me. Okay.
Sounds good.
After you show the video, I do have a question.
All right. All right, so hopefully you all are still able to see my screen-ish. So what are y'all seeing right now?
We're seeing your PowerPoint presentation.
Perfect. All right, I will stop that.
Now we see you.
All right, and I'm gonna go share my tab with the video once it loads. It's there.
And share audio, yeah.
Yes. All right, so this is about a 10-minute video that Sean, KXNX, actually put together on the DX Engineering YouTube page. I picked it because he has some really great overlays showing the different apps, and in real time, so you can see in action a lot of the things that I was talking about, since I can't be there in person to do a demo of Satellite Pass for you. But it also, you're able to see how things vary for linear satellite contact with that wide range of passband versus that FM pass that I did earlier, where I was just changing frequencies on my handheld. So I'm gonna share my screen. All right, share sound. Okay. All right, you should be able to see YouTube right now, correct?
We do, and you might want to maximize or full screen that, yeah.
Yep. There we go.
So we're waiting for the satellite. It's going to come up overhead in about 1 minute. It's going to go from straight north, and it's going to go to the west. Here in central Illinois, it'll be crossing a cornfield, which is nice and flat, and then it will drop back down over the below the horizon, approximately to the southwest. It's about a 30-degree pass, so it's not too shabby. All right, satellite is over the horizon. We have acquisition of signal.
Acquisition of signal. CQ satellite, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, QRZ. PrePass satellite, CQ satellite, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, QRZ. Germany 0 Delta. Germany 0 Delta, good morning. Echo Nancy 50, Illinois, over. Good morning. Yep, King George 0 Delta. I'm Charlie November 88 in Washington State. Very good. Charlie November 88. Thanks for Washington State this morning. 782. Have a good day. Good luck. QRZ, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, QRZ satellite. Early Oscar again, please. Echo Charlie Oscar. I'm running remote. I'm not sure how my audio is doing. Name here is Chris and Echo November 29 back here. Echo Alpha 3 Echo Charlie Oscar for Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray Echo November 50. Your audio is sounding fine, okay? Well, thanks for the report. That's good to hear. First time I've done remote in a while. So I'd like to change the station 73 from the A3. Yep. Okay, 73, and thanks for the call. Kilo Z satellite, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray Echo November 50. CQ satellite, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, KLZ. Whiskey Bravo 8, Papa Foxtrot Zulu. Whiskey Bravo 8, Papa Foxtrot Zulu. Good morning, Echo Nancy 50, Central Illinois, okay? Echo November 91, Echo November 91, Cleveland, Ohio. Hey, good. Nice to work near Cleveland today. 73, thanks for the call. Have a good day. Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo Nancy 50. Satellite, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, KLZ. On the flight. Satellite, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, adjusting for Doppler here. KLZ, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, KLZ. Thanks for the call. Have a good day. 73, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, KLZ. CQ satellite, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, KLZ. November 6, Echo Lima Foxtrot and Echo Lima 29, over. Echo Lima Foxtrot, good morning. Nice to hear Houston on the satellite today. We're Echo November 50 in Central Illinois. How you doing? Well, doing great. Just taking a slow morning approach here in the office and trying to get a few passes in between. I love the 2G satellites, so gotta jump on. I understand. 73, thanks a lot for the call. Have a good day. Sounds good. Thanks for the contact. 73. X, 9X from N6E left. I got 73. Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray QLZ. Okay, satellite is almost southeast now. QLZ, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray QLZ satellite. Satellite, CQ satellite, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, KLZ. So there's somebody tuning across trying to find themselves on the satellite. CQ satellite, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, KLZ. Kilo Bravo 6, Lima Tango Yankee. Good morning, Chrissy. Echo November 50 in Illinois. How are you? Good. So fun. We're doing fine. Thanks for the contact. Have a great day. 73 KB602. 73. Thanks for Southern California this morning. Have a good day. KLZ, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, KLZ. So we'll get the Doppler again. Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray Echo November 50 QOZ. Kilo India 5 Hotel Kilo Echo Mike 1 Kilo India 5 Hotel Kilo KX9X Echo November 50 over. Good dog, gotcha. How's it going? Alright, 72, thanks for the call. Almost at the end here. Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo Nancy 50. Sorry, so that's somebody who's got an audio issue. Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, QOZ. Satellite, CQ satellite, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, Echo November 50, QOZ. Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, this is Kilo Echo 4, Kilo Oscar Lima. Kilo Echo 4, Kilo Oscar Lima, good morning. Echo November 50, Illinois, over. Right on, Kilo X-ray 9 X-ray, this is Kilo Echo 4, Kilo Oscar Lima, and Echo Mike 78, Echo Mike 78. Over. Thanks for the call, 72, have a good day. 73 to you, have a good day, KM4LAO. All right, Kilo
X9X is QRT. Okay, so, we made a handful of QSOs from Ontario to Seattle, Washington, a couple of stations in California. We talked to somebody in Echo Mike 78, I think that's Kentucky, Cleveland. We talked to Houston, Texas in EL29. So that's a pretty good pass. Several stations covering lots of territory. So this is, this is just two Yaesu 817s, a headset, and a handheld dual-band Yagi antenna. I've got satellite tracking programs that track the pass, so I knew where it was going to be overhead. And if you notice the transmit frequency in the video, we started transmitting about 10 kilohertz lower than where we ended up transmitting at the end of the pass. That is the Doppler effect in action. Because we're transmitting on 70 centimeters, we need to constantly adjust our 70 centimeter frequency and keep it aligned with the downlink frequency that I had chosen, which was 145.670 on XW2A. So this is within the reach of all of you. All you need is just the proper equipment so that you can hear yourself on the downlink, and you can be doing this as well. It's not difficult. It just takes a little bit of practice.
So there we go. But hopefully that was helpful and helped show some things, since I wasn't there, I couldn't do a pass in person. I thought there was a question or two.
Yes, this is Dave, W3DJS. How you doing, Ruth?
Good.
Hey, I'm the workshop chair. When can you give a workshop for us?
Let's see.
You don't have to answer right now. I just wanted to put that out there.
Maybe October, November, or
Okay.
early next year.
All right, yeah. I'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
Do we have any questions in the room in the hangar? All right, so nobody wants to ask any questions. I'll ask a simple question. What's the minimum license you need to hold in order to operate satellites?
Technician, anybody, any license that you have can operate, because it's VHF, UHF. So anybody, as soon as you get your license, you can get on the air. There's a lot of really proficient technician level. There's a lot of technician level operators who are able to really get very skilled at ham radio because they're doing satellites all the time. So yes, any level license.
And is there any questions for Ruth on Zoom?
Oh, wait, we have another one in the room here.
Question that I have is, how do you know when to move that antenna? Because I've noticed that antenna for a long time at the beginning of the contact, but I didn't see a lot of the movement. So how do you know when to move that antenna according to the path of the satellite?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great question. So pretty much numbers wise, I will figure out exactly if it's a 12-minute pass, then 6 minutes should be from AOS to peak elevation, and 6 minutes should be from peak elevation to loss of signal. And from there, I will honestly just kind of subdivide that section in my head. So the first couple minutes should be the very, very low, and then kind of just try to keep a smooth arc as I move across the sky. Practically speaking as well, so you heard Sean was in a very low position, so you heard it right away. But basically, what we do is we leave the squelch all the way open. So that noise level is always going to be on. You're always going to hear that. But when you are listening to an FM pass, for example, like the video I had, you can that sound level will change. You will hear it. It'll go from extreme noise to a little fuzzy. You'll kind of hear voices in the muck. And then people will become clear. So basically you figure out exactly where the satellite is going to pass, and then just kind of slowly track in the direction from acquisition of signal to peak to down. And listen while you're doing it to try to hear that noise level fade away into clear voices. And if you're on the satellite and you're hearing it fading, then that's when you know to twist in order to hear it clear again, because you're tracking it to position correctly, but you're not quite polarized with the antennas on the satellite. Did that help?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions in the hangar for Ruth? Come on, you're making it easy on her.
All right, any questions on Zoom?
I'll bite. So when you're first getting started, Ruth, what should a absolute beginner start with here? Because you're getting all sorts of advanced tools here, like SatMatch.com and the spreadsheet from KE0PDR. Where would you advise somebody to start with satellites?
All right. Let me jump back to the PowerPoint. So the basic where I would suggest you start is the very base of what you need is radios to be VHF, UHF, a directional antenna, either a Yagi directional antenna. You can purchase the Arrow or Elk brands, or you can build a tape measure yourself to at least be able to receive it. And coax connecting the two, and then a free satellite pass prediction software to figure out where the satellite is going to be. So that's the 4 basic things you need. And the 5th, very useful to have, is a voice recorder, so that you can hear yourself for the entire pass and be able to transcribe it easier. But it's literally just to get started, you need some sort of directional antenna and radios so you can communicate. And as you can see, I kind of did the average price here. It's not terribly expensive to get into. I mean, most of us will have VHF, UHF radios anyways, so sometimes the biggest cost will just be trying to get a directional antenna. But arrows are not too bad in terms of price, and elks are about the same. So it's very doable.
So you're talking about acquiring the initial gear here. As far as making your first QSO, would you advise, like, for example, just doing like a lot of us do with terrestrial repeaters and just listening for a long time before we decide to just jump in?
Yes, it is very good. It's good to listen first and get a general feel. So, yeah. So when I first got started with satellites, what I did was I figured out, okay, I have the gear for FM satellites. Let's try this. So my first couple passes, I just practiced. I had my arrow, I had my antenna and my handhelds, and I had a pass prediction on my app, on my phone app. And I was just, yes, I was just practicing tracking it and listening, because the passes aren't that long, but they feel longer when you're holding the arrow and holding the antenna and trying to track and keep track of everything at once. So yes, you listen first to just get a basic feel for how it works. I get a general feel for the ebb and flow and how fast it goes. FM is pretty straightforward to keep track of. So it's a lot of people can track for a couple of passes, get a feel for how to do it and hear well. And then within a couple of passes, start calling out and trying to make some contacts. But the big thing is, just make sure that you're listening for the pass, try to get a feel for it so you don't interrupt other contacts that are in progress. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions for Ruth on Zoom?
Yeah, this is Jim, KD4PDY. Good presentation, Ruth. Question mainly around the space station, ISS.
Yes.
Have you worked that much? And is there any kind of documentation as to whether they're going to be voice, packet, or slow scan?
So I haven't done a ton with the ISS packet. That is like on my to-do list, like as soon as I get home, because it's cool. So there is, in general, they don't have a detailed list of when it's going to be on what mode. But a good way to keep track of that is to, ARIS will publish like weekly or bi-weekly news bulletins with listing the date and times of different educational contacts. So you'll know during those times they're busy doing those voice contacts. In general, besides that, it's usually turned on to packet instead, unless there is like spacewalks or docking, and at which point they turn it off. So since they're busy with other aspects of things.
Right. This is great. This brings back memories back early 90s. I worked when the Mir space station, before it crashed and burned. I worked Mir 2-meter FM,
Nice.
50 watt ICOM 229 mobile rig in the house, Ringo Ranger. And I had to go with low altitude passes, because if it was a high altitude, I was coming out the top of the antenna and didn't get a good angle. But I did the QSO lasted about 2 weeks. I would put a message on the bulletin board. Guy in California, when he got a good pass, he'd respond. Then a day or 3 days, the next good pass, I'd pull his response, and it was time enough. I'd put my response back. So we went back and forth. Too bad I never did get a QSL card out of Russia. But, that was the thing that I'm still use the same mobile rig here as a base station that I used on, and it was very easy. It was a PK232 for the TNC, and just worked the packet on it.
That's awesome.
That was a good memory.
Yeah.
But I've really enjoyed your presentation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and the astronauts will occasionally be on voice as well for simplex contacts. For individual contacts, specific versus the school contacts. That's definitely not as common because they're so busy up there. But every so often we'll get one up there.
That's getting involved in Scouts, so I'm looking to try and see sometime in before he goes Eagle, make a pass with the astronauts.
Yeah.
With all the Scouts. Cool. Yeah.
So do we have any other questions on Zoom for Ruth? And last chance here in the hangar. Any questions for Ruth? Thank you.
As always, it's a pleasure to hear from you. Wait, is she? Hello, always a pleasure to hear from you. No, it's off. I don't know what camera I'm on. But she talked earlier about holding the arrow antenna. Ruth has some guns. She can hold that antenna out there for hours. When her and I made our contact, I was on a tripod. I had my arrow antenna on the tripod, on a board and also 2 HT. Now, in the forums, I was told that that was too slow. Well, I disagree because I could go just as fast to move it up and down. I could swing it for azimuth, and I could also tilt it just that fast. So I don't have the guns Ruth has. Thanks, Ruth. Appreciate it. That was a great program. Always, as usual, absolute pleasure. And I tried to have a 10-minute conversation on the satellite with her, but you know that they don't like this stuff. They want our 10-second QSO was really good. Thanks, Ruth. All right, now I guess we have the mic's gotten a little hotter, hasn't it? Well, door prizes. So with that, we've got does everybody have a ticket?
Do I get a ticket?
$1 gift certificates, mini ammo cans with something in it, and a flashlight. It's got. Whoops, sorry.
What's a ticket?
Turned off. Oh, sorry. Oh, and the third setting is SOS.
What is a ticket?
And then a couple of lights and multimeter. No, it does not say blue. It's something else. Go for it, Bill.
You're there, Bill?
I can do it. Here we go. We'll start off. Now make your choice. We're going to do the gift certificates after they're given away. Okay, here we go. 594, 932. Nine, 3, 2. Hey.
What do you want? Multimeter.
That one back in there.
Yeah. It was like
928. 928.
Oh, I was gonna take it. It's not up for sale.
You got to know what you want, or you going?
Gotta look. Got a shot.
Okay. Next one. Here we go. Around. 0, 7, 2.
0, 7, 2.
That might have been the old written system. Yes, full name. 931. Light switch and a flashlight. And last of those, 068. 068. Earl. All right, throwing these back in that we're drawing for the gift certificates. Your choice, $25 or a $28 Guards apparel. 073. 073. Zero 67. What's left is a $25 and the Guards another two $25 ones, right?
I'll get there. No.
Yeah. Yeah. 934. Get them together. And last but not least, 076. zero number. Yeah, all three algorithms, okay. Yeah, tell them
So go down 12 numbers that you got me.
that. All right then, 937.
That's too far.
Okay. Guys, appreciate you coming out. I think we had a pretty good turnout. We've got numbers flying all over the, thank you. We got numbers flying all over the place with this COVID thing. We're trying to keep it safe. Come as you can, come as you will. If you feel you need to wear a mask or sit at a distance or just join us in June, we're happy to have you. Have a great night at 7:30.
All right. Good night, all on Zoom.
Right.
And thank you again, Ruth. Excellent job.
Thank you.